Do you believe that the white Europeans who came to Africa during colonization really left the continent? Well, it's said that colonialism ended in Africa. However, today, there are entire cities of white populations living in various African countries. When the colonization was reported to end, the white Europeans, who had settled in African countries and established their businesses, never left the continent. They had the economies of African countries under control, and even after decolonialism, they could influence newly independent African countries. That's why today, Africa has entire cities, districts, and towns where only the white population live as citizens while having dominance. So, what are the African countries with the highest white population, but nobody knows about it? Welcome to a new episode of Black Afric Diary, a channel where we talk about Black African history, culture, arts, and civilization. It's a place where you will see the real picture of Black Africa, its stories, and the events defining it. In this episode, we will tell you about 5 African countries with the highest white population. Let's get started. Number 5. Zambia. Today, around 40,000 white Zambians live in Zambia, and their influx began during colonization primarily from Britain and South Africa. Unlike Zimbabwe, however, Zambia's white population was more concentrated in urban areas, especially in Lusaka and the Copperbelt region, where the country's rich mineral resources, particularly copper, were located. By the time Zambia gained independence in 1964, the white population numbered around 70,000. This minority group controlled a significant portion of the country's wealth, particularly in mining and agriculture. The copper mining industry, which has long been Zambia's economic backbone, was dominated by European and South African companies during colonial times. Even after independence, white settlers continued to exert influence over the mining sector, as the government initially favored policies of inclusion rather than immediate nationalization. In the 1960s, many white Zambians supported white minority rule in Rhodesia and the apartheid system in South Africa. However, their small numbers made it difficult to establish similar forms of governance in Zambia. At the time, the Copperbelt mines employed around 6,500 expatriate workers, many of whom held South African citizenship. By 1967, white Zambians formed the second largest group of immigrants moving to South Africa, driven by fears over Zambia's shifting political landscape. Between 1964 and 1972, white Zambians were notably overrepresented in the officer ranks of the Zambian Defense Force. At independence, most of the senior officers, including the Chief of Staff of the Zambian Army, were white Zambians. However, by 1972, a sufficient number of qualified Black Zambian personnel had been trained to replace them, leading many of the white senior officers to retire. Following this transition, white Zambians were barred from enlisting in the national military, and they were also exempt from conscription. In 1966, over half of the white Zambian population lived in the Copperbelt region, while 18% resided in Lusaka. Around 95% of the white population lived near the rail line that stretched from the Copperbelt to Victoria Falls. In the 1970s, Zambia began to nationalize key industries, including the copper mines, as part of an effort to assert more control over its economy. Despite this shift, many white settlers remained in the country, maintaining their economic positions in sectors that were not nationalized, such as agriculture, tourism, and private business. However, economic decline in the 1980s, driven by falling copper prices, led to the re-privatization of some industries, allowing white-owned businesses to regain influence. As of 2024, Zambia's white population is estimated at around 40,000. Despite their small numbers, white Zambians continue to hold significant economic leverage, particularly in agriculture, tourism, and private enterprise. White-owned commercial farms still produce a large share of Zambia's food and export crops, such as tobacco, coffee, and cotton. This agricultural output is critical to Zambia's economy, helping to sustain its agricultural sector. White-owned businesses dominate Zambia's safari operations, lodges, and wildlife reserves. For instance, the tourism industry, which was valued at around $1.5 billion in 2023, heavily relies on white-owned safari companies and high-end lodges in popular regions like South Luangwa and the Zambezi River. These businesses are vital to Zambia's economy, contributing significantly to its revenue through tourism. The mining sector also continues to see significant influence from white Zambians, many of whom own or manage smaller mining operations. While the government controls the largest mining enterprises, these smaller companies, which were often established during the colonial era, remain an important part of the industry. Number 4. Kenya. Kenya, located in East Africa, has a notable white population, primarily made up of descendants of British settlers who arrived during the colonial era in the late 1800s. Despite being a small minority, this community continues to exert significant influence within the country. The colonization of Kenya by the British began in the late 19th century, with the establishment of the British East Africa Protectorate in 1895. Many white settlers were granted vast tracts of fertile land in the Central Highlands, an area that became known as the White Highlands. These settlers focused on large-scale farming of cash crops such as coffee and tea, which became central to Kenya's economy. By the 1920s, white settlers had secured both economic and political power, aided by favorable government policies that marginalized native Kenyans. By the time Kenya gained independence in 1963, the white population had become an economic elite, particularly within the agricultural sector. While some settlers left after independence, a significant number remained, continuing to manage large estates and maintain their economic standing, particularly in agriculture, tourism, and business. White Kenyans still play a key role in Kenya's economy, particularly in agriculture. Many large-scale farms in the fertile highlands are still owned by white Kenyans, who continue to produce valuable export crops such as tea, coffee, and horticultural products. These crops are essential to Kenya's economy, generating billions in export revenue and supporting the livelihoods of millions of people. For instance, Kenya is one of the world's largest exporters of tea, and white Kenyans have maintained significant influence in this sector. In 2020, tea exports accounted for approximately $1.2 billion, making it the country's top foreign exchange earner. Additionally, white farmers are active in Kenya's flower industry, particularly in Naivasha, which generates over $1 billion annually through the export of flowers, particularly to Europe. Beyond agriculture, white Kenyans are also prominent in the tourism industry, one of Kenya's largest sources of foreign income. Many white Kenyans own and operate high-end safari lodges and tourism companies in destinations like the Masai Mara, Amboseli, and Laikipia, which attract international tourists. Tourism contributes roughly $1.5 billion to Kenya's economy each year, and white-owned businesses play a crucial role in this sector. Some white Kenyans have also integrated into broader society, holding significant positions in politics, academia, and business. Notably, Philip Leakey, a paleoanthropologist and the son of famed conservationist Louis Leakey, served in the Kenyan parliament, representing the Kenya African National Union Party. Today, around 69,000 white Kenyans live in Kenya, dominating key agricultural industries like tea, coffee, and flowers, as well as the tourism sector. Their control of large farms and luxury safari lodges gives them substantial influence in Kenya's economy, even though they represent a small fraction of the population. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Number 3. Zimbabwe. During the colonial era in Zimbabwe, then known as Rhodesia, the white population, largely of British and South African descent, held significant economic power. This small group, which made up only about 5% of the population, controlled more than 70% of the country's most fertile land, particularly in regions like Mashonaland and Matabeleland. Their wealth primarily came from high-yield agricultural activities, including cash crops like tobacco and maize. which became the backbone of the Rhodesian economy. By the 1960s, white settlers dominated the agricultural sector, accounting for 90% of the country's agricultural exports. They also controlled key industries such as gold, platinum, and coal mining, further entrenching their economic dominance. At its peak, the white population in Rhodesia was around 270,000. This small group not only wielded economic power, but also held significant political influence, maintaining control of the country's most valuable resources and industries. After Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, the white population gradually declined due to political changes and economic instability. One of the most impactful shifts came in the late 1990s and early 2000s, when President Robert Mugabe's government implemented a controversial land reform policy. This program involved the forced seizure of approximately 4,500 white-owned farms, which were redistributed to Black Zimbabweans. As a result, the white farming population decreased significantly, with many emigrating to other countries like South Africa, the UK, and Australia. In 2000, the white population in Zimbabwe was around 70,000, and since then, the population has only increased. Despite these reforms, the remaining white population has retained substantial economic influence, particularly in non-agricultural sectors. Many white Zimbabweans who lost their farms transitioned to urban industries, such as manufacturing, real estate, and banking. For example, white Zimbabweans still hold leadership positions and stakes in multinational banks operating in the country. Tourism also remains a strong sector for white business owners. Many continue to own and operate safari businesses, hotels, and tour companies, which contribute significantly to Zimbabwe's tourism industry, a sector that generates substantial revenue. Number 2. Namibia. Namibia, located in southwestern Africa, is home to a white population of around 150,000, many of whom are descendants of German settlers. That's because Namibia was a German colony from 1884 to 1915, known as German Southwest Africa. The presence of German settlers had a profound effect on Namibia's demographics, culture, and economy, and the German-speaking white population continues to play a vital role in the country today. German settlers began arriving in Namibia in the late 19th century, when Germany established it as a colony. These settlers engaged in large-scale farming, mining, and commerce. The cities of Windhoek and Swakopmund still bear the mark of German influence, with their distinct architecture, language, and customs. However, German colonial rule was also marked by brutal policies toward the native Herero and Nama peoples, leading to genocide between 1904 and 1908. Following World War I, Namibia became a League of Nations mandate administered by South Africa, but the German-speaking white population remained economically and socially influential. When Namibia gained independence from South Africa in 1990, the white population, particularly those of German descent, retained significant control over the economy. Unlike Zimbabwe, Namibia's peaceful transition to independence meant that white Namibians were not displaced, allowing them to continue their economic activities in agriculture, tourism, and mining. Today, white Namibians play a significant role in Namibia's agricultural sector, owning large commercial farms that are critical to the country's food production and export economy. Namibia is one of Africa's top beef exporters, and white farmers control much of this industry. White Namibians are also involved in viticulture, producing high-quality wines that have garnered international attention. In the tourism industry, white Namibians own and operate many of the country's most prominent lodges and safari companies. Namibia's dramatic landscapes, including the Namib Desert, Etosha National Park, and the Skeleton Coast, attract tourists from around the globe. Tourism contributes about 10% to Namibia's GDP, generating around $500 million annually, and white-owned businesses are central to the success of this sector. However, that does not mean white people's ownership of businesses is justified. The white German population dominated the business sector mainly because they possessed the wealth accumulated during colonialism. The mining industry is another area where white Namibians maintain substantial influence. Namibia is rich in minerals like diamonds, uranium, and gold, and white-owned businesses have been involved in mining operations for decades. Namibia is the world's fifth largest producer of uranium, and mining accounts for about 12% of the country's GDP, with white-owned companies playing a key role in this industry. Furthermore, German culture remains deeply ingrained in Namibia, particularly in cities like Windhoek and Swakopmund, where German is still widely spoken. German-style architecture, festivals, and cuisine are visible throughout the country, and German-speaking Namibians play a key role in preserving these traditions. While they maintain their cultural identity, they have also integrated into Namibian society, participating in politics, education, and business. Namibia's constitution guarantees equal rights for all citizens, ensuring that white Namibians continue to be active members of the nation's political and social fabric. Number 1. South Africa. South Africa, located at the southernmost tip of the African continent, has the largest white population in Africa. As of 2024, the white population in South Africa is estimated to be over 4.5 million, making up roughly 7.5% of the country's total population. This community primarily consists of Afrikaners, descendants of Dutch, German, and French Huguenot settlers, and English-speaking South Africans, whose ancestors arrived during British colonization in the 19th century. The origins of South Africa's white population date back to the arrival of Dutch settlers in the mid-1600s, followed by British settlers in the 19th century. These European settlers established colonies that laid the foundations for modern South Africa. During the era of apartheid, which lasted from 1948 until 1994, the white population controlled the vast majority of the country's wealth and resources. Apartheid was a system of institutionalized racial segregation that allowed the white minority to dominate the black majority politically, economically, and socially. Under apartheid, white South Africans owned most of the land, businesses, and industries, especially in sectors such as mining, agriculture, manufacturing, and finance. South Africa's vast mineral wealth, including gold, diamonds, and platinum, was largely exploited by white-owned companies, fueling the country's economic growth during the 20th century. And this legacy continues to this day. While apartheid officially ended in 1994, the economic legacy of white control remains evident in South Africa today. White South Africans continue to hold significant wealth, particularly in the private sector. Many of the country's largest corporations, especially in industries like mining, finance, and manufacturing, remain under white ownership or leadership. The mining industry, which is critical to South Africa's economy, contributes approximately 8% to the country's GDP and employs hundreds of thousands of people. Some of the wealthiest white families live in South Africa, in contrast with South Africa's black population, mostly of which fall in the lower and middle class. The Oppenheimer family, with a net worth of approximately $9.4 billion as of 2024, has a deep legacy in South Africa's diamond industry. The family controlled De Beers, the world's largest diamond company, for nearly a century. Then there is the Rupert family, which boasts a net worth of about $14 billion in 2024, largely due to their dominance in the luxury goods and investment sectors. Led by Johan Rupert, the family controls Compagnie Financière Richemont, the parent company of prestigious brands like Cartier and Montblanc. What do you think? Did the African countries make a terrible mistake by allowing the white European colonialists to live even after independence? Isn't it true that they would have been only allowed to live if they had agreed to give up their colonial assets? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on the fact that in these African countries, the white population has more influence than the native black population. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.